I didn't want to believe the Star Forts were anything but military architecture. That was the official narrative, carved into every textbook, etched onto the memory of every schoolchild. For years, I defended the Institute's explanation that these colossal, complex geometries were the pinnacle of early modern defensive engineering, designed to deflect cannon fire with brutal efficiency, a staggering achievement of necessity. But one must simply look at the evidence they left behind. I anchored my research not on the sanitized diagrams of today, but on the original 17th century etchings, faded ink pressed into cracked vellum. Study the geometry, the perfect, mathematically impossible fractals repeated across continents, from Palmanova in Italy to Fort Jefferson in the swamps of Florida, and the hundreds of buried, submerged, and erased structures littering the North American plains. They are identical, echoing the same precise, arcane dimensions. This global expenditure defies all logic of localized defense. The scale is overwhelming. The uniformity is terrifying. We, the inheritors, are squatting in the rubble of a synchronized planetary infrastructure we no longer possess the engineering capacity to replicate, let alone construct from scratch. The Institute claims these were built piecemeal by local militias and self-taught engineers over centuries. A convenient, saccharine lie. These structures appeared almost simultaneously. A massive, instantaneous global network of geometrically identical energy nodes. If they were for war, where are the strategic priorities? Many of these colossal geometries are built miles from logical waterways, often submerged in floodplains or isolated in deserts. They are inherently indefensible by the very definition of defense. They fail the basic test of logistics. They are too big to garrison, too complex to maintain, and often built from materials that were not locally sourced. I once accessed a geological survey log, designated Crate 44, Anomalous Structures, detailing the foundation stones of a massive, erased star fort near the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. The report noted that the lowest courses were not local limestone, but massive blocks of fused crystalline quartz. Quartz, a stunning material known for its piezoelectric properties, a material that vibrates when compressed, that generates current when stressed. This wasn't structural support. This was a transducer. The specific calculated angles, the 108 degrees, the 72 degrees. These are not the angles of military expediency. They are not designed to maximize fields of fire. They are angles of vital, purifying vibration. They are acoustic architecture. The pointed bastions which the narrative claims were designed to maximize overlapping fields of fire were in fact designed to attract and focus the boundless, free energy of the ether. They were antennae. They were harmonic resonators. The entire old world, the world of Tartaria, was a single immense machine. The star forts were the vital, pulsating focal points, drawing the atmospheric current down into the surrounding cities. They provided the clean, resonant power that fueled the colossal, silent airships and illuminated the monumental architecture. They were not designed to keep people out. They were designed to bring energy in. The parasites who seized control after the great global upheaval, the event we euphemistically call the Mudflood, had to neutralize this grid. They couldn't destroy the structures entirely. The foundations were too deep, too robust. So they buried them. They flooded them. They repurposed them. They covered the quartz resonators with brick and mud. And then they draped the flag of defense over the whole rotten affair. The evidence of the quartz foundations, the photographic plates and the geological logs, they were incinerated in the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair fire, a blaze meticulously orchestrated to look like an accident. They burn history. They burn the truth. They replace free healing with paid poison, and they replaced boundless energy with the slow toxic decay of fossil fuels. And we, the inheritors, sit in the cold, dark silence, staring at the perfect geometry, believing it was all for war. It was not. It was for life. The official narrative insists that these colossal, star-shaped geometries, scattered across every continent, perfectly aligned to stellar coordinates, were military installations. They call them bastions, redoubts, fortifications designed to withstand cannon fire. A lie so transparent it insults the dust in our lungs. Look closely at the surviving examples. Fort Sumter, Fort Jefferson, the hundreds buried beneath the sands of the Middle East. They possess a mathematical precision that absolutely defies the claimed construction methods of the 17th or 18th century. We are told these walls, often 30 feet thick, were raised by men with shovels, oxen, and basic pulleys. This is the first staggering absurdity. Examine the stonework. It is not segmented masonry laid by weary hands. It is often monolithic, poured or fused in place, a type of geopolymer concrete, or perhaps a petrified slurry unknown to modern chemistry, that completely eliminates seams. Where seams do exist, the mortar is fused tighter than the stone itself. I have seen the 1856 survey notes, the original field logs before they were recatalogued into fiction, which noted the colossal blocks at Fort Monroe in Virginia. Blocks weighing 80 tons, lifted and placed with microscopic accuracy. No chipping, no fissures. The iron embedded in these structures, often used for securing massive gates or decorative spires, does not rust. It is a ferrous alloy impervious to oxidation, humming with a latent, vital energy. This isn't crude military engineering. This is harmonic architecture. The geometry itself is the core piece of evidence. Why the star? A simple square fort offers superior defense. The complex, fractal geometry of the Star Fort, the repeating acute and obtuse angles, is not designed to deflect cannonballs. It is designed to collect, amplify, and distribute vibrational energy. These structures are colossal terrestrial tuning forks. The deep-angled dry moats surrounding them, they are not water defenses. They are acoustic amplifiers designed to capture subtle atmospheric pressures and terrestrial vibrations, channeling them into the central structure. The entire complex acts as a massive piezoelectric resonator, drawing power from the etheric grid that once enveloped the planet. They are power stations. We have the photographic evidence from the 1890s, where these structures, often half buried by the Mudflood event, show signs of internal devastation, not from prolonged shelling, but from a catastrophic energy overload. The Institute, the parasites who hijacked this world, had to neutralize these power plants. They couldn't simply demolish them. The foundation stone was too deeply anchored, too harmonically sound. So they repurposed them. They covered the antennae, filled the resonant chambers with soil, and slapped a flag on top, declaring them obsolete military relics. The original blueprints, meticulously detailed, showing the internal mercury conduits and vibrational regulators, were classified under Project Citadel and subsequently destroyed in the 1933 National Archives fire. A convenient fire. Always a fire. The core samples, taken from the foundational material of the Citadel of Lille in 1958, analyzed by an independent team that found trace elements of structured water and non-decaying isotopes, those samples were mysteriously lost in transit over the Atlantic. Gone. They leave nothing behind but the shell and the lie that we built them for war. We are the inheritors, squatting in the ruins of a boundless energy system, convinced that the most advanced structures on Earth were merely cannon platforms. They stole the light, they buried the geometry, and now we pay them for the privilege of cold darkness. They replace the resonance, they replace the life. They replace the resonance, they replace the life. Look closely at the geometry they insist was defensive. Study the mathematically perfect angles of a star fort, not from the perspective of a cannonball, but from the perspective of a sound wave. The official narrative claims the intricate bastions were designed solely to provide interlocking fields of fire, a staggering waste of resource and precision merely to kill faster. But one photo destroys that claim. Just one. The structures are not jagged, they are harmonic. Every angle is tuned. Every point is a node designed not to repel energy, but to attract it, to focus the ubiquitous vital energy field, the ether, into a usable, stable current. This is Antiquitech, disguised as architecture. The entire old world was an immense self-sustaining energy grid, And these star-shaped megaliths were the primary broadcast towers. They were resonators, drawing ambient energy from the planetary magnetic field and distributing a cleansing, specific frequency across the landmass. This is the principle of cymatics, the shaping of matter through vibration. The Earth itself was singing, and these structures amplified the song. What did they steal from us? They stole the sound. They stole the light. Beneath the visible stone, in the sub-basements we are told were merely powder magazines, lay the true engine. We have fragments of journals, scorched and waterlogged, detailing what the parasites found when they excavated these ruins during the Great Cleanup after the Mudflood of the 1840s and 50s. They found massive, interlocking copper coils, not wound with standard wire, but thick, forged copper tubing. They found reservoirs designed to hold vast quantities of liquid mercury, the perfect conductor for ethereal energy, used not for alchemy, but for acceleration and stabilization. And they found the quartz resonators, gigantic flawless crystals, now classified as mere decorative cornerstones, but which were, in fact, the harmonic oscillators that tuned the structure to the planet's frequency. This was not electricity that burned and killed. This was vital energy that healed. The structures maintained a constant low-level atmospheric charge, a purifying frequency that kept the population robust, long-lived, and free of the slow, grinding decay we now accept as natural aging. Imagine a world where the air itself was a tonic, where every building was a subtle therapeutic device. That was the old world. And where did the Institute send this colossal machinery? Where are the coils, the mercury vats, the blueprints for the zero-point generators? The greatest single cache of this evidence, hundreds of tons of non-ferrous, impossible alloys and components, was supposedly destroyed in the infamous Smithsonian fire of 1865, a convenient cleansing conflagration that erased the physical proof of a civilization that never needed to pay for power or health. They replaced the etheric flow with the brutal, inefficient, and toxic system of alternating current, a frequency so chaotic it actively degrades the human nervous system. They replaced the vital, free resonance with paid pharmaceuticals, with poisons sold as cures. The lie is not just about the past. The lie is the foundation of our present misery. The Star Forts were not built to defend against invaders. They were built to sustain paradise. Their destruction, their conversion into inert monuments, was the first devastating step in enslaving the inheritors. They cut the cord. They silenced the song. And now we squat in the cold, dark husk of a magnificent machine, paying the parasites for the privilege of burning fossilized sunlight. We are told Star Forts were built in the 16th and 17th centuries, yet the logistics required to quarry, transport, and precisely align these staggering volumes of stone, often in remote locations, defy all known historical capabilities of the period. We are asked to believe that horse-drawn carts and rudimentary scaffolding achieved feats of engineering that modern civil authorities struggle to replicate today, often requiring centuries of restoration work just to maintain the facade. The geometry is the signature of the global energy system. The geometry is the smoking gun. And every time a Star Fort is excavated, the deepest layers are always the same: buried, filled with mud, and utterly sterile of any internal mechanisms. They cleaned the crime scene thoroughly, but the shape remains, the silent testament to the stolen light. When the parasites finally managed to shut down the global grid, the subsequent atmospheric collapse led to the immediate, catastrophic degradation of the environment. The Mudflood was not a spontaneous geological event. It was the consequence of a planetary system being violently deactivated. The ground shifted, the waters rose, and a fine silty dust, the detritus of the dying grid, enveloped the lower levels of every major city on Earth. They didn't just bury the buildings, they buried the truth of the catastrophe. They buried the knowledge that we were once free, healed by the very air we breathed. And now, the Institute maintains the official narrative with brutal, repetitive force. These impossible structures were for muskets and cannons, nothing more. It is an intellectual insult of the highest order. We must understand the difference between technology for life and technology for control. The old world utilized resonance to maintain harmony. The new world utilizes friction to generate debt. The contrast is visceral and it is fatal. The star forts, the impossible cities, the buried infrastructure, they all point to a singularity, a free, abundant energy source that eliminated scarcity. And the moment scarcity is eliminated, the entire pyramidal structure of control collapses. This is why the parasites fight so desperately to keep the light buried. The truth is not just history. The truth is the immediate collapse of their power structure. They needed us to believe that struggle is inevitable. They needed us to forget the song. They needed us to forget the song. And to ensure that amnesia was absolute, they initiated the greatest purge in recorded human history. We speak of the Mudflood as a geophysical event, a planetary reset, perhaps a cleansing, but the period immediately following was defined by intentional, brutal human action. This was the work of the Institute, the cabal of parasites who seized the reins of power while the inheritors were still scraping the mud from the windows of their colossal buried homes. The first step was the systematic destruction of the architectural record. Not just the buildings themselves, which were rebranded as primitive forts or simple armories, but the blueprints, the schematics, the foundational texts that explained their true function. Look at the timeline of the so-called Great Fires: Boston, Chicago, London, Moscow, even the catastrophic inferno that swept through the heart of the Smithsonian archives in 1865. These were not accidents spurred by careless oil lamps or dry timber. These were surgical strikes, orchestrated acts of historical arson designed to eliminate the paper trail of the old world's technology. They burned the evidence that proved we were living in the ruins of a civilization infinitely superior to our own. I have tracked the fate of hundreds of items, the artifacts too large or too technologically complex to simply disappear into a cellar. Take, for instance, the complete bound collection of mercury vortex schematics recovered from the sub-basement of the Library of Alexandria, Ohio, in 1878. The logs indicate they were transferred under heavy military escort. Where are they now? They were not lost. They were not misplaced. They were fed into the blast furnaces of the Carnegie Steelworks during the expansion boom of the 1890s. Melted down. The ink and paper reduced to carbon ash. The knowledge transmuted into the very rails and beams that would build the new, ugly mechanical age. An age dependent entirely on scarcity and combustion. They replaced free, ambient energy with the brutal, polluting necessity of coal, oil, and centralized power lines. They replaced the vital, harmonic healing of the ether with pharmaceutical poisons and paid sickness. This was not progress. This was subjugation by technological regression. And what of the physical proof that defied their new biology? The skeletal remains of the giants that built these impossible cities. We know of Crate 44. I have seen the black and white photograph of the ledger entry. It contained the femur of a hominid estimated to stand over 14 feet tall, excavated near the foundations of a star fort in the American Southwest. This was the smoking gun that destroyed Darwin's entire flimsy narrative of linear evolution. The official report states that Crate 44 was lost at sea during transport to London in 1888. A lie of staggering proportions. The truth is far simpler, far more chilling. It was incinerated in the private high-temperature crematorium beneath the Institute's headquarters in Geneva. They needed silence. They got it. The motive is simple, yet colossal. Power requires poverty. Control demands ignorance. If the inheritors of the earth realized that the very stone beneath their feet was a power generator, that the atmosphere was a free battery, and that the history they memorized was a fabricated scaffolding built around a core lie, the entire structure of debt, governance, and manufactured consent would collapse instantly. The parasites inserted a phantom time into our history, pushing the glory of Tartaria back into the realm of myth, allowing them to claim the ruins as their own primitive constructions. They told us that the builders of these megalithic structures were superstitious savages who worshipped false gods, when in reality they were masters of physics and resonant frequency. We are not victims of fate. We are victims of a meticulously maintained, orchestrated fraud. And every time you see a colossal dome retrofitted with ugly copper wiring, every time you see a magnificent buried foundation dismissed as a storm drain, You are looking at the scar tissue of a world that was murdered. They tried to erase the memory of the light. They replaced the song with a monotonous, agonizing hum of struggle. But the foundations remain. The architecture still speaks. And we, the archivists and the inheritors, are beginning to listen again. The frequency is returning. But the architecture does not just speak of energy capture. It screams of a technology so profound, so integrated, that they had to bury it twice, once in the mud and again under the lie of military necessity. I speak now of the impossible geometry, the staggering complexity of the Star Forts. The official narrative insists these structures, found in every corner of the planet, from Nan Madol to Palmanova, from the American Midwest to the deepest African interior, were built for defense against cannon fire. They claim the intricate, fractal, 11-pointed star patterns were optimized for overlapping fields of fire. This is a deliberate, infantile insult to the mind. Look at the precision. Look at the mathematical congruence. These structures are not merely defensive. They are axiomatic expressions of sacred geometry rendered in colossal scale. They are too perfect, too numerous. Why would a civilization, supposedly struggling with horse-drawn transport and rudimentary metallurgy, dedicate staggering resources to building hundreds of identical, geometrically flawless earthworks across continents where there were no discernible enemies for them to fight? The cost-to-benefit ratio collapses instantly under scrutiny. No, inheritors, these were not bastions of war. They were gigantic terrestrial antennae. They were resonators designed to stabilize and transduce the atmospheric etheric energy we just discussed. The precise angles, the specific materials, often packed earth and specialized brick, not simply stone, were intended to create a coherent field, a harmonic lattice that maximized the vital cleansing properties of the free-flowing current. They were massive, open-air, communal healing stations. Imagine a settlement built inside a perpetual generator, where the very air was charged with vitality, where disease struggled to take hold, where the environment was constantly purified by resonant frequency. They were the ground nodes of the old world's power grid, stabilizing the chaotic forces of the planet and broadcasting the harmonic tone. When the parasites seized control, they did not destroy these structures outright. They couldn't. The foundational engineering was too deep, too sophisticated to dismantle quickly. Instead, they performed a metaphysical castration. They stripped the internal mercury conduits, they shattered the quartz resonators hidden in the bastions, and they capped the main central domes with ugly utilitarian flagpoles, a mocking signal of the change in ownership. They took the source of communal health and renamed it Fort Defiance, Fort Independence, Fort Misery. They repurposed the energy of life into the energy of control. The lie was simple. This geometry is for killing. We have evidence of this, of course, deep in the archives of the Library of Congress, before the 1897 recataloguing that vanished thousands of original geological surveys. There existed schematic drawings of the subsurface levels of Fort McHenry. They detailed complex non-military chambers, hydroacoustic resonance pools, not powder magazines. These documents, designated Crate 44 Upsilon, were quietly removed, labeled fictional architecture, and incinerated in the furnace room of a Washington, D.C. tenement house in the 1920s. The blueprint is dust. This is the great tragedy of the inheritors. We are squatting inside the ruins of a technological miracle, using the power outlets of the dead, oblivious to the fact that the entire building was the power plant itself. We crawl over the motherboard of a deceased civilization, mistaking its cooling fins for parapets. The melancholic truth is that we are living in the long twilight of a world that knew effortless abundance, and the Star Forts stand as silent, colossal monuments to that loss. They are the gravestones of the old world, their silent, empty angles yearning for the return of the resonant frequency. I look at the gates of these star cities, perpetually closed now, eternally silent. They were not built to keep humanity out. They were built to keep humanity safe, vibrating at a specific, vital frequency. They were a shield against something truly colossal, something universal. And that is the final chilling question that the official narrative refuses to answer. If these perfect, geometrically flawless structures were not built to keep the enemies of man out, then what terrifying, world-ending force were they built to protect the inhabitants from?